Well, welcome everybody. Thanks to so many of you for joining us today. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willits.
Here.
All present.
Well, thanks. We've got a full agenda, a lot of work that I think is pretty exciting. First off, I'm going to ask that Wendy Ellistad join us for an update on public records. As she's coming up, I just want to kick this off. We've said often at the city that transparency and easy access to public records is a core value. It's important to me. I've made many commitments to keep that, and had asked a while back our team to look at ways that we could make the public records requests system more efficient, that we could really, as our sign says, there's nothing we can't do better, improve on the way we address transparency and access to public records citywide. And I see Jamie here, I see arts and history here. I mean, there are so many different departments that were part of this work and that will continue to be part of this work. And one of the examples of the changes that was made in response to it was the way on-body video camera footage is now released. And so Wendy's here to share more about where we're at, where we're going to continue working to make the city the most transparent and easily accessible city in the state, and really appreciate the work that's gone on into it so far. Yeah, your mic isn't. Try again. Could we get the staff?
I have a green light.
Oh,
Good
there we go.
afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Ellistad. I'm the citywide portfolio manager that works out of the mayor's office. And as the mayor mentioned, I'm here to give you an update on our public records improvement initiative that staff has kicked off. So the city of Boise is committed to transparency and openness in governance in government. This is something at a staff level that we work very hard to incorporate into our day-to-day lives. And there's probably no place that this is seen more clearly than in our public records processes. The Office of the Clerk, as you know, ensures that public records are both retained properly internally within the city, and requests for any public records are released quickly and accurately to members of our public that might be interested. The city staff across all departments participates. We all get trained on understanding how to retain our records properly and how to fulfill records requests that might come in from the public. We get over 14,000 records requests a year that staff responds to and releases out to the public. Because we get so many, we have a tracking and fulfilling process, as you might imagine, to ensure that we very consistently release those records as requested. This process itself is regularly assessed for improvement opportunities and ways that we can streamline it. This past winter, the mayor requested staff to review the PRR process again and focus on our continued commitment to open and transparent government, as well as rapid delivery to our public requests for information. In the spirit of there's nothing we can do better, a group of team from various different departments gathered and started working on this effort. So the team of cross-functional staff members was assembled in January, and we looked at how public records requests could be filled more quickly and with maximum transparency, and a process that required fewer staff working hours. The team has spent the past 6 months, sometimes in very active conversations, in order to identify bottlenecks, envision a better process, and consider the technology tool improvements that would be beneficial to this area. At this point, we're focused on 3 improvement areas. So our records retention schedule, which, as you know, is the governing policy that tells staff how long to retain our records, is in need of a complete analysis and a possible revamp. We're also considering a new technology tool for our public records fulfillment and tracking. And finally, we're streamlining staff roles themselves to ensure that records management is done in the most effective way here at the city. So the timeline for this initiative, once again, began this past winter and continued through the spring, where we investigated all of our current records management processes. We looked at training, we looked at our standards, we looked at our public records request processes, and we ensured that our records retention schedule was complete. The work that we're focused on right now is redesigning. So we are redesigning our public records request process and the roles. We're looking at a more streamlined process and making sure that the number of times staff touches a public records request is the right number, and that we're not losing time in between the touch points as we hand off between departments and people. The next work is modernizing our tools. So we will be evaluating, selecting, and purchasing a new tool to be able to track our public records requests so that we can fulfill them in a way that ensures full transparency and metrics that we can track. And then the heaviest lift is modernizing how we actually handle our digital records. Things were a little cleaner and clearer when records were pieces of paper. A certain number of file cabinets was full and it was time to get another certain number of file cabinets. Things are a lot more complicated now that everything is digital. So we need to revamp our records retention schedule in order to ensure it's matching our current business process. And then we have to reorganize all the back-end systems that store those digital records. This work will continue all the way through the fall of next year. So you perhaps shouldn't expect to hear an update on this one until fall of 2025 as staff puts all the work together. And this will finally enable us to be able to optimize some of the manual work. So we're going to be looking at automation of resource requests, requests for records, as well as fine-tuning our records management so that we can explore some other metrics that would make sense in tracking. We've been busy. So over the course of the past winter and spring, many different teams within the city have been trying to focus on improving our records management process. The city attorney's team has hosted a monthly records management training series. So as all the records teams from across the city and various different departments attend and talk about various topics related to records management. The new employee orientation has been improved and expanded so that we talk about records retention on day one for employees. And for those of us who saw day one a while ago, we got refresher training on records requests and records retention so that we were all trained the same when it comes to policy. And then finally, we've done an analysis of our records retention schedule, which is why we wanted to make sure we got in front of you today to give you an update. As technology adjusts and records are created and stored differently over time, we periodically review our records retention schedule. But part of this analysis over the past 6 months indicated that 2 changes should come forth for your consideration today. These 2 changes are additional types of records that staff has recommended getting added to our retention schedule. The first is survey. So the first change that we would like to suggest is adding internal surveys to our records retention schedule as their own record type. Staff typically uses surveys as an easy way to query large numbers of staff members on their opinions or inputs. So specifically, we're looking to gauge interest, we're looking on informational purposes, and we recommend that this record type gets added to the retention schedule with a 60-month duration, which is what matches other types of correspondence. I will note that this does not pertain to personnel file surveys. This is informational surveys across the city. And secondly, staff is recommending a second change to the retention schedule for your consideration. This would be the addition of a specific record type for on-body video from our police officers. While we currently already have multiple types of video already designated in the retention schedule, we're proposing a new record type specifically for on-body video in order to improve consistency and transparency. At this time, we're recommending that on-body video gets retained permanently. However, we're also recommending a further analysis is determined for a more nuanced retention schedule, depending upon the content of the on-body video. So if we proceed with this recommendation, the further analysis is expected to stretch over the course of the next 12 months, and our recommendation today will be revisited by you in the next 12 months for a more nuanced approach. At this point, I'll stand for questions.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. I process a lot of records retention in my day job, and I know what the time commitment it takes. Thank you for the presentation, and glad to see the city's moving forward with looking to optimize that process. I do have a couple questions. One is on the surveys, the internal surveys. Do we currently retain our external surveys?
Thank you for the question. Our external surveys are retained as part of our general correspondence, but our internal surveys are not called out specifically in our retention schedule at this time.
Perfect, thank you. I'm kind of curious on the on-body video. Is this all recording? I seem to think that this could be a large amount of data that we're storing indefinitely.
Thank you for that question as well. It is a large amount of data. So over the course of time, if we permanently retain on-body video, there will be an impact to storage costs for the digital storage of that on-body video. So that is why staff would like to come back to you over the course of the next year with a more nuanced approach for how long to keep each of the videos based on type.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
can you go back to the slide that looked like that scene from Indiana? There it is, Indiana Jones, where there's the long hallway of files that we'll never be able to get to. One more forward. That's the one. So a couple questions here. One, I think it makes sense to do the two proposals that you brought forward, and I think it really makes sense to go back and do a more nuanced approach to that on body camera. Because I think there will be things that will be valuable to have for a really, really long time, and some other stuff that we could figure out, like what is the schedule, to get it off there. The other question that I had, and maybe it actually wasn't on this slide at all, was you had mentioned some automation. And I guess what I'm wondering with automation, does that mean that a member of the public, when they're asking for a public records request, that they can put it in there and it's delivered to them without staff interaction? Or does that mean it's more automated for our staff itself?
Thank you for the question. It's on the non-Indiana Jones slide.
I missed it.
So to answer your question, council member, there is a possibility of it being both. So the automation in particular is what we're looking for, is how internally we can automate the process to go and find the record and have it prepared to be served up for the audit for the member of the public with minimum staff touches. However, we are looking at how to pre-publish particular sets of information so that no one from the public has to request the record. It's already published.
Great.
So we're looking at both.
That's super helpful, because I think that that's where I hope like an end goal can be, is that the stuff is readily available, that it doesn't take so much additional staff time, because it's a lot of staff time to continue to pull all these different requests. And if it was more readily available, hopefully, we could reduce some of those requests. So I'm glad to hear that it's both, and the fewer amount of touches for staff, the better.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a question for you. Recently read some reporting about public records requests in the Pacific Northwest. Super excited to see how Boise stacked up with neighboring cities. There's 4 that they investigated in the Treasure Valley. I was surprised to see how much lower our fees were than the other 3 cities that were in that report. I'm curious, as we talk about modernizing, we're talking about new tools. We're also talking about ways to utilize take less staff time, which is expensive as well. How do you foresee, costs for public records requests that do have to come before you, and those fees going forward with these tools that you're looking to get?
Thank you for the question. So our fee schedule right now, by Idaho state statute, the first 2 hours of staff time that it takes to fulfill a request is uncharged. So that's work we do for free. As we get faster at being able to automate finding the records, our goal is to be able to fulfill more requests within that 2 hours so that our fee structure stays very low. Our recoup of costs associated with staff time to records requests is not a solid recoup. We do significantly more work than we charge for, and that's deliberate. It's important to us to foster openness and governance, and so we charge for as little as we can. and some of the back end processes around finding the records and assembling a package. If we can streamline that, then we'll streamline the whole process in with the hope that fees stay low or non-existent.
Any other questions or feedback?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Hey, Wendy, thank you so much for the presentation. A few clarifying questions. Do we currently have a policy on body video camera? And who gets to review those at this point?
Thank you for the question. So our policy with on-body video, there are multiple different types of video that we are currently retaining. We have not used the phrase on-body video in a way that's very consistent across our retention schedule. So this change will make it very clear for staff exactly what to do with that video type. So that's why we're proposing the change. Your second question, I'm sorry, could you repeat?
You bet. Who currently has access to review video?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to have to follow up on an answer on that one.
All right, thank you very much. And Wendy, if you would get that answer and just share it with Amanda so all of council can see it.
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thanks. All right, Maureen and Brewer is walking up. We've got an update on the temporary shelter and options to review it with all of you. As Maureen's getting settled, this is, we've been talking a lot about housing in the last couple meetings, and I'm really appreciative of the partnerships that have made it possible to get to where we're at today. We've said as a city that we're committed to investing in long-term solutions. And together with philanthropy and businesses and the Community Foundation, we've come up with a model to pay for the services that are needed in those long-term solutions. And then just last week, council approved funding for housing at New Path 2.0, that gap financing that is one of those long-term solutions. Want to thank the members of our continuum of care that are here, our Path Home as it's known. I see St. Luke's and the Housing Authority, Interfaith, staff for the continuum of care, Catch and others are members, and the work that you do to make sure that we're able to provide services to residents in Boise. And then finally, Interfaith that's helped us with the Red Lions. We can make sure that families and folks that are that have medical needs had safe shelter. And today we're going to be talking about what's next. And so I want to thank the rescue mission who's here too, because they are willing to partner as well with the city for long-term solutions as we look at how best to support the families and others that are at Red Lion with long-term shelter and housing and the wraparound services they need to thrive. So Maureen, thanks for being here, for providing an update and options for council to consider. Look forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Maureen Brewer. I am the Senior Manager of our Housing and Community Development Division here at the City of Boise. And as the Mayor stated, I'm here to provide an update on the hotel shelter that's been in operation in partnership with Interfaith Sanctuary. They have been the operating agency of that hotel shelter since May of 2020. I wanted to start just by going through a brief agenda as we move through this presentation or discussion so that council can be oriented to where we're headed, kind of how we find ourselves at this moment, what this moment means for the partnership and the future of the hotel shelter in terms of next steps. And then, as the mayor said, we are seeking direction on two different options that I'll bring forward to you as our path home and particularly our shelter partners pursue next steps. So I am going to conclude with a recommendation for what those next steps ideally should look like, and I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any comments mayor and council may have. And as the mayor mentioned, we have a contingency of our Path Home partner agencies here, including our primary shelter operators that can speak to any specific questions that I may not readily have the answers to. So first things first, in terms of how we got here, as I mentioned, the hotel shelter has been in operation since May of 2020, and it was opened in direct response to COVID-19. And I do want to take a moment, as you all take in this slide, just to mention that the hotel shelter has been hugely successful in many ways. And I'm personally very thankful to not only our shelter partners, to include Interfaith, who has run the hotel shelter on our community's behalf, but also our public health partners, especially our local hospital systems and medical providers, for helping our Path Home partner agencies and city staff set this resource up all but immediately upon the onset of the pandemic for our most vulnerable population. And of course, in this case, the folks that we're talking about are vulnerable by the mere fact that they're experiencing the trauma of homelessness, but also vulnerable in this instance or over the course of the last few years, because unlike the majority of Boiseans, people experiencing homelessness had nowhere to safely socially distance and quarantine. So our congregate shelters, particularly Interfaith, did not have the physical space to safely socially distance folks or to quarantine people experiencing homelessness who had contracted COVID-19. So wanted to just put that context in your minds as we move through this. And then also mention, specific to the funding history, that the total cost to keep the hotel shelter open for 5 years, from May 2020 into the spring of 2025, is approximately $7.9 million. I want to point out, though, that only 14%, excuse me, of this funding has come from local city funds. So 86% of the funds that have been used were from COVID relief monies or sources that were specifically designated for an eligible use, such as this temporary hotel shelter, in part or because of the disparate impact of the pandemic on people experiencing homelessness. So staff working on this effort, city staff and then staff across a multitude of partner agencies, have really done a masterful job of maximizing federal fund sources. And as you can see here, if you look at on the right side of the slide, shifting between those fund sources as necessary over the years. Nearly 1,000 individuals have been served in over 300 households at the hotel shelter since May of 2020. So 969 total individuals within 333 households. You can see on the chart here that kind of the breakdown, if you will, about how many were COVID-19 positive, how many were otherwise medically fragile, and then over half of those served have been families with children, 191 total families, 250 parents, and almost 300 kids. Where we find ourselves now then, as a partnership, and most of us are acutely aware of this, but COVID relief funds are nearly fully expended across all fund sources. So in order to be proactive, our Path Home, alongside Interfaith, and very importantly, the Rescue Mission, Catch, the Housing Authority, Jesse Tree, the WCA, our local hospital systems, have all began planning to scale down the hotel shelter. As council knows, city staff and partner agencies involved in this effort are seeking direction today on how we may safely transition folks to either other shelter options or, better yet, to permanent housing. On that note then, and before we discuss the options to transition or scale down operations at the hotel shelter, it's supremely relevant to note that the city is actively working on long-term housing solutions. So just want to briefly run you through this table. The Franklin received its temporary certificate of occupancy and is moving families into homes now. We have.
And Maureen,
Sure.
that's 20, the Franklin is the Franklin and Orchard. And so that 20 represents the 10% commitment to families exiting homelessness.
Mayor, that's correct. So
Okay.
that's 20 homes that are dedicated to households that are exiting homelessness. And then the same will follow in 2025 at State and Arthur and at Denton, with 9 at State and Arthur dedicated to households exiting homelessness, 19 at Denton. And then as far as the next 3 projects, the Sherwood, which we've been referring to as the Park Apartments and will now be known going forward as the Sherwood. The Sherwood, New Path 2.0 and the Fulton are all site-based permanent supportive housing. The Sherwood is applying for tax credits. They'll submit their application on August 2nd, so that's happening imminently. And then the first set of homes at the Sherwood will come online in September 2025. New Path is preparing to close financially in the next several weeks and then break ground in September. So those homes will be ready September 2026. And then assuming that the Fulton is able to secure tax credits they're putting in for the same application as the Sherwood, those homes should be ready in early 2027. And then trailing those will be McKinney and Lusk with another 50 plus homes dedicated to households exiting homelessness. Both of those projects should be prepared to break ground in 2025 with a 2-year construction timeframe. Okay, so if we move back to from the kind of long-term solutions that the city is investing in and that we've got teed up in our project pipeline and back into short-term solutions, which of course includes the night-by-night response to homelessness that our shelter partners manage, I want to just frame up a few factors that informed the 2 options we'll put before you and ensure that those 2 options are both feasible and responsible. So first of all, as of July 11th, so just a couple of days ago, Jody and I connected before the presentation, and these figures haven't shifted. Across 41 rooms on 2 floors, there are 95 total individuals. So there's 18 families with children that those families make up 72 total individuals, 27 parents, and 45 kiddos. And then we've got 23 medically fragile individuals currently at the hotel shelter. So that's one piece. And then this next set of factors, just again, want to make sure it's framing up the 2 options that we'll present. One is that our path home is the partnership is orienting around an October 2025 open date for Interfaith's new permanent shelter. And of course, that's not certain, but it's the best information we have today, just like the opening of our long-term solutions on the previous slide. So that's one thing. Another important piece is that the city's ARPA team has confirmed that there's a small amount in the neighborhood of $200,000 or so of remaining city ARPA funds that could go towards this eligible use. And then finally, the hotel shelter has expressed willingness to restructure the current contract and lease to reflect a scale down of this resource. And this could include eliminating an entire floor and or moving into a room by room type of contractor agreement. So with that context, then here are the 2 options. Option 1 would see the hotel shelter phased out by March 31st of 2025 to reflect the city's current agreement and current funding with Interfaith. No additional funds would be needed. Interfaith would need to stop admitting new households into the hotel shelter immediately, and then also begin transitioning the medically fragile in particular to various rescue mission facilities. And then together, the rescue mission and Interfaith would begin conversations for families with children about what a safe community placement might look like. Of course, the circumstances in which all of the households at the hotel shelter find themselves in are remarkably unique. They face different barriers. So Interfaith and the Rescue Mission will be working very closely together to triage those situations and identify alternatives. That could be an alternative shelter placement, it could be transitional housing, or it could be permanent housing. Given this time frame of phasing out by March 31st, 2025, it'll be difficult for most folks to transition to permanent housing. Option 2 then would see the hotel shelter phased out by September 30th of 2025. And this option would require another $463,000 in funding that is proposed to come from both ARPA and the general fund, likely from year-end cost savings. The hotel shelter would, by and large, and probably with a few exceptions, we want to maintain a certain degree of flexibility, stop admitting new medically fragile households, and the rescue mission will take the lead in that space. And then the hotel shelter would stop admitting new families with children by March 31st of 2025. And this is in order to ensure that any family sheltered in that bridge timeframe between April and September. So when our current agreement and the current funding expires and we enter the 6 months between April and September, when we anticipate that new resources will be online, be it the hotel shelter or some of those long-term housing solutions that I showed you on one of the previous slides. This is the cost that we anticipate having for that bridge timeframe.
And so just a little clarification on that, Maureen. So what
Sure.
you're saying is, yes, that's the cost associated with it, but the bridge till September then provides you clarity on, be it permanent supportive housing with the numbers that you outlined, or the shelter, there's a place for those families to go?
Mayor, the short answer is yes. I want to expand upon that a little bit. Our Path Home will ensure that no household is exited to the street, in that we will offer an option or multiple options if those are available for either shelter or housing. So winding down, having a little longer runway, that extra 6-month bridge sets us up for a higher degree of success, that we're able to do that well and safely and responsibly. In that next September, we anticipate that Interfaith's new shelter will be opening. The Sherwood Park Apartments will be coming online, and some of those dedicated units that we talked about in both, or in the Franklin, State and Arthur and Denton, will be coming online too. So it best positions us to do that, and it best positions us to exit folks to housing, because ideally we'll do it that way rather than sort of going from shelter to shelter. We can come back to this slide. I think I've got 2 more, and then we can continue questions and discussion, but I think it'll help with the mayor's question too. So just want to point out that key components of the transition, regardless of whether it's option 1 or 2, include a tremendously focused collaboration between Interfaith and the Rescue Mission. And both shelters have already been engaging to that end. So we're off to a really good start in terms of who is at the hotel shelter, and the collaboration taking place to start placing folks. The Rescue Mission, they will determine, they want to be careful about speaking for them or even for Interfaith. So just want to remind Mayor and Council that we've got representatives here if you've got further questions. But the Rescue Mission will determine admittance to their programs on a case-by-case basis, and both shelters will be working closely on the transition process to various community placements, excuse me. This effort is also going to necessarily entail previously mentioned our Path Home partner agencies such as Catch and the Housing Authority that are engaged in referring folks to appropriate resources they may be eligible for. And of course, a concerted effort to house as many households as possible. So the plan, though, again, is for most, if not all, medically fragile folks to transition to the rescue mission and then to begin problem solving for families with children between our two primary shelter providers, but also the WCA, Catch, and the Housing Authority as the primary partners in that effort. I mentioned this, but it's probably worth saying again that both shelter partners in our path home will exercise some degree of flexibility based on individual circumstances, the availability within other shelter resources, the availability of space in one of the housing programs, et cetera. And then under option 2, just wanted to reiterate that the current hotel contract and the lease that Interfaith holds with the hotel will have to be renegotiated. Okay. So just a few more comments here, and then happy to take questions or stand for any discussion. The hotel shelter has been critically important, and it really has been for a multitude of reasons. I'm just going to share 2 of them. One is, of course, the response to COVID-19, but then also to have a resource like this online while the city has been working so earnestly to bring long-term housing solutions online. It's been of critical importance to the partnership and those that we serve. I want to also acknowledge that the city has been working on homelessness from every angle. We've got new site-based PSH projects coming online.
PSH.
Sorry, thank you. Permanent supportive housing projects coming online, the Sherwood, the Fulton, New Path 2.0. Dedicated units within the affordable housing the city is investing in. The city's contributed seed funding for the Supportive Housing Investment Fund, provided prevention funds to Jesse Tree to keep people housed, serves as the backbone support of our path home, including funding coordinated entry. And just as a brief reminder, coordinated entry ensures that our path home is serving those most in need first and using those funds as efficiently and effectively as possible in that regard. And then the city is also funding a street outreach team to connect folks who are unsheltered to services. And then, maybe most salient for today's conversation, the city stepped in last year and again a couple of short months ago to keep this hotel shelter resource online when other public partners walked away. So in setting that up, I just want to acknowledge that taking a homeless services resource offline is really hard, and it's going to be hard in March, and it will be hard in September. But because we have a collaborative partnership, it is possible, and we can do it in a responsible way. The city has embraced its role as a funder of solutions, both short and long term. And like I mentioned, other public partners have yet to embrace that role. That said, there are households that need our help right now while we continue to bring long-term affordable housing online. Thankfully, gratefully, we have shelter partners who can and will case manage household by household to transition folks to another resource, and who can and will work together to keep open a reduced version of this resource until September 2025. So our shared goal during that timeframe is to house as many households as possible permanently. I do want to be clear that realistically, the partnership will also need to transition households to other shelter options. I've mentioned that primarily that would be options at the Boise Rescue Mission, but by early next fall, that could also include transition to Interfaith's new permanent shelter, if not one of the permanent housing options that is slated to be online within that same timeframe. So we are asking City Council, I am asking City Council to step forward one more time on this particular resource to create and enable a much needed bridge to not only shelter, but also the permanent housing solutions that are forthcoming, and to step forward in such a way that ensures all households can be offered a safe community placement. So this recommendation to move forward with option 2, scaling down the hotel shelter by September 2025, using an additional $463,000 concludes what I have to share with you today, but I'm happy to stand for questions, and I know our partner agencies are as well.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Maureen.
You bet.
Yes.
Maureen, could you talk to me about what the contract might look like next year? How many rooms you think we might rent if we're trying to provide services for 13 families?
Mayor, Council President, yes, we would plan to scale down to 15 total rooms from 41. So it would eliminate an entire floor, scale down to 15 rooms, and 2 of those will need to be used for staff, including staff that work the graveyard shift. So 13 rooms would be available for households needing this specific resource that Interfaith and the Boise Rescue Mission haven't been able to problem solve into another shelter placement.
Do you have an idea within that contract, how much is paying for room versus staffing resources under that? Just back of the napkin math, looks like that's about 5,000 per room per month. So I'm just trying to get an idea of how much this is services versus the room.
Mayor, Council President, the per room cost at this point is $75 per night. There's also a $5,000 insurance policy that we have to cover. Moving into that kind of 6-month bridge, if you will, the hotel costs would be $216,000 for that 6-month time frame, and program costs that include staff, food, supplies, et cetera, is just shy of $250,000. So you can kind of take that ratio and extend it out to what that looks like now, if that makes sense.
Could you go back to your slide that shows the 2 options? And could you kind of paint a picture of what transition options are going to look like in March of 2025 relative? It seems like we have a good idea of what may be available in fall of 2025 with Interfaith services provided by Boise Rescue Mission, and then also the Sherwood, formerly known as Park Apartments. But what would a March transition look like if council were to go that direction?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, a March transition is going to be a bit of a sprint that starts now. And it is going to mean that most families are transitioned to a shelter placement within the Boise Rescue Mission facilities. That might mean in Boise, that could mean at one of their Nampa shelters.
And the alternative, just like that's probably the option right now, would be like we don't expect other resources available, permanent or otherwise.
Mayor, Council President, the only permanent housing resources that we expect to come online between now and March of 2025 are those 20 units at Franklin and Orchard. And our Path Home writ large and Catch and the Housing Authority will continue to house folks through our scattered site housing programs. Those spaces, those program placements are a bit of a trickle for a variety of reasons. There's finite size to those programs, which means you can serve a finite number of households. So we do not expect that to be either one of those resources in terms of housing options to be readily available for households that are currently sheltered at the hotel. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, Madam Mayor. Couple questions for you. First of all, though, I want to say thank you. I think we gave you a pretty hard task back in February to come back to us with some solutions so that we're not rolling into February without having had a conversation first. So really, really appreciate that. And I really want to say that I appreciate all the nonprofits that are in here today. It's fun to have a room full of nonprofits and our partners here in the community. And I especially want to say thank you to the Rescue Mission. I had a chance to go over to your grand opening not too long ago up there on Overland. Beautiful building, beautiful event. I tend to feel like I've got my finger on the pulse for most capital campaigns going wrong in the city, but you raised a lot of funds and got it open without a lot of fanfare. And I was just really impressed all the way around on how you were able to bring that new service online. So I do appreciate that partnership here. So my two questions, one is that in an ideal situation in option 2, we have some of our partners' facilities coming online as well as some of our own facilities coming online. And then also we know that we're sort of in an unpredictable world and sometimes things take longer. When we're renegotiating that contract with the Red Lion, do we have the ability to have additional spots if we need it, or are we just not really making that an option with option 2?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we could likely, and I say we meaning the partnership and primarily Interfaith who holds that contract with the hotel, we would likely be able to build in a little bit of flexibility because obviously these timeframes, be it for housing or shelter, can move. That being said, I think the partnership is committed to the timeframes that we presented to you today and want to be supremely mindful that this marks the 3rd time that we've been back before City Council asking to keep this resource online while we bring these other solutions forward. So what I would propose, if there is a significant shift in timing, that staff will share that with mayor and council. And you have our commitment collectively to continue to problem solve that, including with the extended community. I think we came in here with a specific ask today for a 6-month bridge because we know we need it. Moving forward, if there's, a couple week or several week time frame, I have a lot of faith in our partnership's ability to talk through and work through what that might look like if we need, say, another month next September. It would be my intention, and I think I can speak on behalf of the partnership, that it would be our intention not to be back before you on this issue specifically.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that. And, hopefully that's a good deadline for all of our different partners that we have working on getting these projects complete, is that we do have some firm deadlines to push. And I appreciate that you would come back to us if anything was going to change. But that second question is sort of along the same lines, and it's the more sunny day scenario is that we get all of these things online, and between now and March 1st, potential additional opportunities occur. Do we have, if we're able to get more families out, if additional partners come on board, if additional facilities somehow exist between now and March, do we have the ability to decrease, I guess, what our contract would be out at the Red Lion?
Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, the Red Lion, the hotel, was very amenable and understanding, I would say, and in knowing that we're scaling this resource down. I think it would be collectively our intention to build in as much flexibility as possible now into next year with that contract, so that first and foremost, we're meeting the needs of the folks that are there. And then should something surprising happen, good, bad, or otherwise, that we have some level of agility to flex up or down to that.
Wonderful. And Madam Mayor, I guess just one more comment. I appreciate both of the options that you brought over. I'm certainly in support of option 2. I think staying at the hotel is a better situation for families than staying in some of the shelters, and it's still not as great of actually getting into more of a permanent spot. And so if we were going to go that direction with option 2, again, that I'm in support of, I have faith that you'll continue to explore additional opportunities, knowing that there's not only the cost that's associated with keeping folks in the Red Lion, but there's also the well-being as well. And the faster that we can get folks into a permanent solution, the better. And I certainly am welcome to explore those opportunities and support those opportunities as they come forward. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. I just, first of all, Maureen, thank you so much for this. I'm really impressed with this option too. I know that these partnerships are not easy, so I really appreciate all the work that's been done to pull this together, and really so grateful for the wonderful community partners that we have here in Boise. Curious, this might be answered with the case management solution, but I'm curious how communication is handled for these folks, and are we in, because it sounds like maybe it's about 40 households between the individuals and the families. And is there, or, do we have the luxury, I guess, of like mapping a route and options for each of the individual households?
Mayor, Council Pro Tem Council Pro Tem, excuse me. I might take a stab at that, and then if it's appropriate, invite both Jody and either Reverend Bill or Jean up to sort of speak to what their communication pathways looks like. We have a multitude of data sharing agreements and personally identifiable information sharing agreements so that our shelter providers truly can go family A, medically fragile individual B, not to dehumanize who's in there, but really look at what their options are given their unique set of circumstances. And those conversations and communication between both shelter providers has already started. I know that they have also put together a script, if you will, to explain that this resource is scaling down, or that it will be scaling down. And to Councilmember Halliburton's point, a private hotel room is better, let's just say it plainly, than a congregate shelter space for most, if not all, people. And so, again, have a lot of confidence about how both of our shelter providers will be able to communicate how this resource is coming offline and what options might exist given each household's unique circumstances. So if you'd like to hear more, I know that Jody and Jean's making eye contact with me, or was, so I'll call out her, can speak in greater detail if that's helpful.
Just if there's any more to add, if anybody's inclined, but not required. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's not a huge amount of households, so I appreciate that. That customer service touch, and allowing folks to feel taken care of, even if moving to a lesser option, that we're thinking about them and trying to provide for them, however we can, and particularly down the road when we have some of this housing coming online.
Certainly. And Mayor, Council Pro Tem, I would just add that while there's 95 individuals at the hotel shelter, there's upwards of 200 at Interfaith Shelter and several hundred across the rescue mission shelter options. And so being mindful about those folks too, that we're also trying to, as quickly or as expediently as possible, move them into a better situation, be it transitional housing or permanent housing. So this will necessitate, like I said, a really focused collaboration on the hotel shelter part, but notwithstanding all the other folks that are sheltered, and even those that we're trying to connect with through our street outreach team that are not in a shelter at all.
Madam Mayor, Maureen, a couple of questions. First of all, thank you. Big thank you. Can you give us some granularity about the coordinated entry process in regards to, we've got families here and individuals that are at the Red Lion. There's housing that's coming on, both public and private. How are they prioritized? In other words, if we decide in March and we know that things are going to be open at a certain date, I'm very curious to see, like, how do we know that those folks from the Red Lion actually get to the housing? What does that process look like?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, Willetts, let me answer that a couple of ways. So, in addition to sort of the case by case, intense, collaborative case management that Interfaith and the Boise Rescue Mission will be undertaking, we will also be making a concerted effort, and by and large, this is true. It might take a couple of weeks for it to happen, but we'll also, for each household, once they're admitted into the hotel shelter, but making a concerted effort to ensure that all of those have had their coordinated entry assessment. Not dissimilar to what I was just sharing in terms of the fact that there are hundreds of other households, including at least 100 that are sleeping unsheltered every night. The hotel households have to sort of filter into those other households that are being sheltered elsewhere. So the coordinated entry prioritization is an effort to serve those with the highest severity of service need first, coupled with the length of time that they're experiencing homelessness. It is a formula, but there's also a case conferencing team led by Sadie and others at Catch that work the list name by name to make sure that, let's say we have 4 openings in a given month, that we're serving the top 4 households that are eligible for that program. For example, and I don't mean to get too detailed, but you did ask for some granularity. But for example, Taking Root, which is a program out of Catch, only serves families with children. So all of our medically fragile folks aren't going to be eligible for that program. So there's just a little bit of give and take in that regard. And the coordinated entry queue changes daily. So truly daily. So for us to sort of say now, 6 months or a year out, where folks will be on that list is impossible, frankly.
So Madam Mayor, and Maureen, it is possible that those that are in the Red Lion today would not be in priority for some of the other housing that maybe are for folks that are already sheltered. I'm getting a nod.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Willetts, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then whether this is a March decision or a September decision, it'll be shy of 5 years that this option has been available. Are most of the folks that are there right now, have they been there the entire time? Or have we seen a lot of mobility in and out during that period?
Mayor, Council Member Willetts, I would look to Jody to confirm, but I don't think anybody that's there now has been there the entire time. There's a lot of movement in and out as we get folks housed or get them into a better situation or a different situation.
Okay, and one more. Just a big thank you, Maureen. As Councilmember Halliburton alluded to, we brought this up earlier this year, and I think you sense that we wanted a plan, and you've brought us a plan. And I really appreciate our nonprofit partners in the room. Jody, I hope you don't have PTSD from being back here. But I said during the very long hearing that we needed partners and we needed nonprofit partners to help us in this work, that we can't do it alone. And we needed to create an environment in which folks felt like they could thrive. And I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the rescue mission being here. I so appreciate the rescue mission stepping up on this. We can't help people unless we help each other to do it. And I am deeply grateful. And I hope that there are more folks out there that want to do this deeply Christian work. If the time permits, I would really like to hear from both Jody and the Reverend with a specific question. And the question would be, if we picked the earlier date, what would be the greatest challenge in meeting that? And do you think it's possible from your expertise?
Sure, we've got time. What I'd ask you to do though is so that everybody can hear, is come on up here and talk from the mic.
council members, Mayor McLean.
Oh, I think we're back at the staff mic instead of the public mic.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So the answer to the question is September feels hard. So March feels really hard. There's some work that we need to do with the rescue mission, and we are working super closely. Medically fragile, we need to collaborate with hospitals we do respite, we do hospice. So I think for both agencies, a rush, I don't think will serve anyone well. I think if we can build in the time to do this really well together, I think it'll be less trauma for all involved, including the partnership itself. So that's my honest answer.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm not Reverend Roscoe. I do try to impersonate him every now and then, but I'm Jean Lockhart, and I've been the boots on the ground person. We work with, just so everyone knows, we work with Interfaith every single day, trying to make sure we have people sheltered in the best possible way. And in terms of the timing, it is short to get challenging people into housing. And we all know how it is out there. It's possible, but I mean, it's theoretically possible, but we don't know as much as Jody does about it because she's worked with this population for the last 4 years. And we're just coming to the table in the last couple of months at the request of the collaboration on this specific project. So we can do the best we can. Obviously, the ideal situation is everyone's housed as fast as possible. Right. That's ideal. None of us are trying to drag our feet on getting that done. And we're being pretty creative about it. So it's next March is pretty fast. And we do want to do this carefully and expeditiously and make sure everyone's in the best place they can possibly be.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I think it's my turn as we come down the dais to thank each and every one of you. Thank you, Maureen. This is what we were looking for and more. I really appreciate you looking at where that chasm really ends, not just drawing this down so we didn't have to do this again in February, but really looking at where that chasm is, how close we are to it, and building that bridge just a little bit further. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm definitely supportive of option 2. And I just want to personally thank Reverend Roscoe, staff, Director Peterson Steigers as well for being present, not just here, but every day for our family and our neighbors and our friends who desperately need these services at different times in our lives. So thank you so much.
Madam Mayor. Maureen, thank you very much for the work that you've done here. As other council members have said, we asked to come back with options, and you have. And I just really want to give my appreciation out to the members here today and our partners in the room. Housing's not an easy. There's no easy solutions when you're medically fit and you have funding. And this makes it so much more challenging, and we can't do that without our partners. And we need you guys, and we hope to continue to have you. So thank you very much for being here and for working with us. Quick question, Maureen, is I think sometimes people will see the price and think, wow, it's really expensive for hotel rooms. I think as we get closer, and this isn't just for hotel rooms. There's a lot of other services. Can you maybe outline some of those services so people know what's being provided and what constitutes somebody as being medically fragile?
Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, again, I'll provide a high-level answer, and then if you don't mind to having Jody back up to sort of speak to exactly what services they're providing at the hotel shelter in particular. I think a big realization for the partnership when the hotel shelter opened was the importance of a private room, and B, the setting itself enabled medical providers to come on site to provide medical services. And back in 2020 through 2022 or so, a lot of that had to do with treating patients that were well enough to be discharged from the hospital, but were still battling COVID-19. And we had a medical provider coming on site to do rounding. And then it kind of transitioned into, as Jody said, some respite care, again, for folks that are okay to be discharged from the hospital, but wouldn't necessarily be okay being discharged into a congregate setting. So the hotel shelter has really enabled medically fragile to be provided with services in a way that is more difficult to do in a congregate setting, and I think really helped inform the design and delivery of services of the new permanent shelter that Interfaith is working on bringing forward by next year. Aside from that, as far as specifically speaking to the medically fragile component, the hotel shelter is staffed 24/7. And I, again, might invite Jody up to speak to what types of staff you have there and kind of what the day-to-day might look like.
Council members, Mayor McLean. So the way that the hotel shelter works is we're divided into two distinctly different programs. The medically fragile has staff that's actually trained at a level of CNA. So we're taking in seniors and medically fragile who may or may not be able to actually even serve themselves with bathroom and shower. But we are working with the hospitals directly, and they brought home health with them. And so there's an amount of time where we're getting that support from medical technicians. And then there's some times where my staff is actually just making sure everyone's okay. Respite has a much more full-time healthcare providing program, but we're still using that staff because things happen with that very fragile. We also have the more chronic illness, congestive heart failure, people who are requiring dialysis, things like that, that make them, they can't be out on the streets during the day. So we also have staff that provide transportation back and forth for routine treatment programs, things like that. So that's the medical piece. With the nutrition piece that comes from our shelter, we actually, that staff's not paid. We just do the work at the shelter, and the nutritional, the food itself, that's what this contract pays for, is just the food itself. Then we have the family program, and that has 2 family case managers, and that's just to cover 7 days a week. Those case managers work on housing placement. They work with, obviously, the school districts, counseling, medical, anything that's required that a case manager would do. And then we have an evening shift manager. They're handling the dinner service, the intake, if there's someone coming in from a hospital. We do 24/7 intake at the hotel. And then we have a graveyard, and the graveyard must be on site based on the contract, the lease itself. Someone has to be at the shelter 24/7. And so we have a graveyard shift. So in that, we have special programming. We have the Project Wellbeing Juniors for our kids. We bring some support over from the shelter, but we don't actually charge the hotel. We just want to make sure that the kids are getting access to art and stuff like that. So what you see on the budget is the bones of what is necessary to keep the building open and running 24/7, and making sure that we're effectively moving people out of the shelter as soon as possible. And also working really closely with the hospital providers, and also Full Circle and Terry Riley. We do intake from them if someone has something that is considered very contagious, we'll quarantine. So the hospital relationship piece is pretty deep.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I really appreciate the work of Interfaith Sanctuary. You guys have had a big lift over these past years, managing, running, coordinating everything that's happening at this shelter space here in the hotel. Thank you. I think here on council, I can't think of any more good work that we should do than protect our most fragile. And hearing from those who are out in the field every single day, I will be in support of your recommendations to extend. Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Maureen, for this. I'm supportive of option 2, and thank you for council for your input on this. Just want to say a deep thank you for Boise Rescue Mission for coming to our rescue on this one. these medically fragile folks. This is a difficult population to get services for. It's something that's kept me up at night thinking about this since we had it last presented to us. And so deep gratitude for doing this, and for Interfaith for supporting this contract and doing the hard work to make sure that we have we have a longer term, more sustainable facility for you to deliver these types of services. So thank you very much.
Right. I would like affirmation of the direction, but we will take action when a budget forward. So I'm gonna just, I don't know if you plan to do a motion or if it's a general nod in the direction.
I think I can do a motion if council would prefer. I think we have at least 5 individuals that have signaled support for option 2. Is there any objection to option 2 among council?
Madam Mayor and Council President, just a comment to make us think about option 1. I think when you have a deadline and it's imminent, you know you have to move faster. And I think it's human nature. If we were to say option 1, I think we could get it done by August. I think if we say September, it might be December. And so I would prefer to have an earlier deadline and then a check-in in 4 or 5 months to see where we are. You know, it's a difference between 9 months and 13 months difference from today. And then we could make adjustments as we go along. But I think if we say it's a year and so out, I think it's human nature, and I think it will be at least September. I think if we say it's March, it will be at least March and might be July. So just an idea on timing.
Madam Mayor, I'd move that we affirm the direction of option 2 as presented by staff.
Second.
Second.
Motion, and I heard the second over here first. I'm gonna go.
Jimmy beat her. He beat her.
It's like the game. Was that Councilmember Halliburton? Second, we've had discussion, but open to more. I appreciate your suggestion. Does anybody want to add anything? All right, clerk?
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Willetts.
No.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, thank you. Great discussion. Thanks to each and every one of you for the part that you've played in taking care of folks since this opened, and in the part that you're playing to help us transition in a good way these folks into the future. So thanks everybody that's been here and for your comments today from both Interfaith and Rescue Mission. I'm going to make sure, Maureen, that you return, you'll figure it out, but the next steps for council will be to see a return with the specific IBC. This is our last meeting till recess, so most likely immediately after recess. Thank you. Okay, one more topic before executive session, and that is the South and Lowell pools analysis. Doug is here with us to walk through that. You know, I'm excited to be having this conversation today and excited that the pools are in the budget that we're reviewing tonight. And we've heard loud and clear from the community how important these pools are to open. My kids were Lowell pool kids when they were little, and they are also have lots of friends up on the bench that would love to see a pool open too. And this has been an ongoing conversation, one that I've been committed to in terms of getting pools open for our residents in these parts of town. This is the overview of the analysis that council funded. Can't remember now when it was, but it was recently. And Doug will walk us through it, talk about next steps and the points in time in which decisions will be made. But really, I'm glad to have you here, Doug, tonight to have us walk through what's next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. First off, I just want to also thank you for your patience and for your funding earlier this year on, per your request, coming back with more finite funding options and also more finite options period that you could look at. If you recall, I believe it was 3 years ago, we were in front of the current council at that time, and presented a couple of different options. Funding was an issue. Looking at what the cost of those pools were going to be was literally over 100% swing either way, up or down. And it was council's desire to just table it and then let's take a look at it down the road when we can fund more opportunity to have more of those finite discussions about the options. So that's really what we have today for you is we have spent the last several months with the team putting together some options for council to consider and some costs that are associated with those options as well. And then just to give you some background on what we'll be talking about today with these two pools. These are what are referred to as a Bentz design pool. We were one of the first cities in the country to have these two pools that are located both at South and Lowell, South Junior High and Lowell Elementary School. They were constructed in 1953, so that puts them roughly 71 years old. These pools are very unique. You're all familiar with them, what the entranceway looks like. It is a very unique design. All of the pools that Bentz did had that same, very similar design. Depending on what websites you look at and who you talk to, there was anywhere between 70 and on the high end, 100 of these at one point in time across the country. The unique design is they are a two-level pool. And that was a great design by Wesley Bentz in that it took up less footprint, so you needed less land to be able to construct. And also you just needed, it was easier to construct a facility on two levels other than spread it out over a much larger footprint. They both pools are exactly the same in design. They have a 3-foot shallow end and a 12-foot deep end. And as I mentioned, they are the two oldest pools that we have out of the 6 pools in our inventory. Excuse me. So this just gives you a quick snapshot of the timeline. Back from 2020, during the pandemic, we had closed both South and Lowell Pool, as well as actually all 6 of our pools at that time. And we took the opportunity to do some a little more in-depth analysis on both South and Lowell. And based upon the deficiencies at both of those, with both of those pools, the decision was made that when we started reopening other pools after the pandemic, that we would not reopen South until we could find the funding first off for the deficiencies, but more importantly, really circle back with the mayor and city council to talk about what do we want to do moving forward with the 2 pools. We did some structural analysis in the 21-22 timeframe. We also did a very extensive community engagement process at both locations and gathered a tremendous amount of input, both in-person open houses as well as online. Based upon that, we began looking at what it would take to bring both pools, all the deficiencies of both pools up to consideration. And that's where we came back to council and asked for some additional funding to really put a team together and have that team do a more in-depth analysis, sharpen up the pencil a little bit more than when we came to you with this in that 21-22 timeframe, and really come back to you with some much better numbers and some legitimate options. And that's really where we're at today. So back in 2020, when the original analysis was completed, some of the verbiage in those documents, which are actually on our website, really indicated that there were overall poor conditions at both locations. Obviously, because of the 2-level structure and without a wheelchair access or any other way to get from one level to the other, there is some significant ADA restrictions. And so both of these pools are not fully accessible to our public. And so that was certainly a concern or a consideration we had in looking through how we bring those codes up to date. But what we are proposing to you today does resolve all of those ADA challenges that we discussed in 2020. So a quick update, our project team, we had CM as our contractor. We had a pool design company out of San Diego. Aquatic Design Group is the name of that group, and they do a tremendous amount of pool design work around the country. And then we had a Cushing Terrell architect do the design of the pools that we'll be bringing before you today. So we have those cost estimates and those associated designs done. And we've also done a little bit more structural assessment. We've actually hired an outside structural engineer, that has done some core samples and a number of other types of assessments on structures that like similar to the two structures we have, and have given us a report. For the most part, they're actually in pretty good shape. There is some overall damage from water and just all the chlorine that for 71 years has been absorbed within the rebar and the concrete. But overall, there is a consideration that both locations seem to be in pretty good shape right now. So this is just a layout of the both current locations. There are some site constraints. Both pools fit pretty much right now on a very small piece of land that we own. As I mentioned, South Pool is located at South Junior High and Lowell at Lowell Elementary School. The city does own the small pieces of land that each of these are under. There are some site constraints in that all the options I'll be bringing forward to you tonight, Madam Mayor and council members, do require some variance that we'll need to be asking for, and also some additional potential land from the school district as well. So I just want to keep that out there, that there are some constraints with the site. So some of the alternatives, through this whole analysis we've been going through for about the last 6 or 7 months, there are options for both pools can be renovated, but only one pool has an option for an actual rebuild of a new pool on site. And the spoiler alert on that is low pool because of the shape of the parcel we're on, and also there is a flume that runs through a portion of that site as well. And also we don't have as much opportunity to work with the school district to add additional land at that location. It's a small school site already, so there really isn't an opportunity to reconstruct a whole new pool at that location. We can rebuild the existing pool, correct the deficiencies, and bring it up to code, but we could not bring you an option to actually build a new pool at that site. South, on the other hand, as you'll see in the next couple of slides, we do have that option, and that's why we have said both pools have options for renovations. The layouts that you'll be seeing today is still in progress, but I do have to give a shout out to our contractor and to Cushing Terrell, and we do have a representative, Scott Roberts, who's our architect here, for their work on this. They have really narrowed this down and given us some good numbers and some good variance in those numbers, and also amazing options I think the council can consider. We did ask that the costs reflect at least a couple of years out from an inflationary standpoint. So these aren't today's costs. We have built in a little bit of inflation to look at a 25, 26 timeframe. So as we work with the mayor and council on what the timeframe looks like for the construction, we'll need to look at that number as well and start looking at how we're going to have to adjust that if it goes beyond the 25, 26 timeframe. So we'll begin with South Pool. So the current alternatives for South Pool, it can be renovated, as I mentioned on the previous slide. You can also, there is enough room, although there are some site constraints, and we will need to have some land variance or land consideration with the school district, but you could rebuild that pool as a new pool on the existing site. There is enough space there to do that. We did run the 10-minute walk numbers at the South Junior High location. We have about 2,100 residents and 868 households that are within a 10-minute walk of South. We also put in the option of the possibility of building a new pool at Whitney Elementary School. And for geography purposes, it's about a 5-block distance between where South is located and Whitney. Whitney is located on the corner of Overland and Owyhee, so Overland Road and Owyhee. South Pool is located on Shoshone, so just northwest of where Whitney Elementary School is. If you're familiar with our model, and I know Madam Mayor and council members, you are, but all of our pools are our model. They're housed with 5 of our 6 pools are housed with school district schools. So only Ivy Wild is the only pool we have in our inventory that actually isn't adjacent to or actually located essentially on school property. So we reached out to the Boise School District just to have a quick conversation. Is Whitney a possibility? And we received a commitment that it is. So this is an option for council to consider. We did run the 10-minute walk numbers on that, and you can see there are about 4,400 residents that are on that other side of what would be Overland Road that attend Whitney Elementary School that would be affected by this in the 10-minute walk. So the numbers do go up a little bit when we go from one location to the other. So looking at South Pool, my apologies for the graphic. Hopefully, Madam Mayor, council members, you can see. We just made this very basic. This is just a quick design if we were to renovate the pool. What we would be doing is in the light blue would be new locker rooms and restroom facilities on the back part. That would be a new building, would have to be added to the back part of the pool. Hence, in my previous mention that we would need some additional land from the Boise School District in order to pull that off. You see just the different areas. We would add an elevator on the bottom portion of the pool, and that would become, we would re-renovate the entryway, and then you would have the entryway. We'd have a walkway along the bottom, what is now the bottom portion of the pool on the lower level. Then you would have the check-in at that location, and you would have options of going up with the elevator or taking stairs at that location. We would rebuild new mechanical and chemical rooms as well, and those would be new facilities on the back part of the pool as well. This estimated cost from our contractor is about 9.2 million, and they have gotten that down. They feel very comfortable at a plus or minus 15% variance, up or down either way. And so this is the option for renovating South Pool at its current location.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Doug, could you tell me, I'm not as familiar with this pool. What is the depth of the pool, and is that consistent throughout the pool?
So the depth, Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, the depth in the deep end is 12 feet, and the depth in the shallow end is 3 feet, and it's gradual from 3 feet to 12 feet. But right about in the middle, it takes a significant drop to that 12-foot depth.
Okay, thank you.
So what we'd be doing here basically is using if you're familiar with this pool, you walk in through the front area and you would go either right to the men's and men's locker room, to the left, you go to the women's locker room as it's currently structured. And there's changing facilities and restroom facilities at each of these locations. So those would go away. And on one side of the hallway, we would turn into storage, and on the other side would be the walkway that would take you back to the actual check-in area, where then you would have access to the elevator or to the stairs, as I mentioned previously. So if we looked at the exact same site and we rebuilt a new pool at this location, as I mentioned, it does fit here. That is a 6-lane pool on the left. It would also have like a slide component. We would not be looking at a diving board here, but we would have a slide component similar to what we have at Ivy Wild. There would be new buildings constructed that would house, again, the locker rooms, all our mechanical features, and all of our chemical rooms. The C-shaped area that you see would be a small kiddie pool that we would add there. So we do believe there's enough room on this site that if you were to stay at the same location and rebuild at that location, you could get a 6-lane pool plus a kiddie pool plus all the other features we have, with working with the school district on getting some additional variance on the back part of this location.
Madam Mayor, can you tell us what the square footage of pool space that is on the rebuild?
Do we know, Scott?
Will you, Doug, repeat that?
So it's a 75 meter.
I'm just going to
Meeting,
ask you actually, sir, if you'll pop up here to
Yeah,
public
why don't we do
mic,
that?
so it's on the record. Thanks.
And Madam Mayor, I'm just curious if we're gaining pool square footage.
Madam Mayor, my question falls into that too. I was curious on the capacity between the one pool and the other.
So real quick, Scott, Madam Mayor, council members, what I would tell you is right now we have a pool that has an accommodation of about 8,000 total visits a year. There's not much to the pool other than it's a great body of water to swim in. This, on the other hand, would be similar to size of Ivy Wild. So where we get somewhere in that 30,000 plus visits per year. Our capacity, my apologies, I can get back to you on that, but it's much more significant at a larger pool than the footprint we currently have with both South and Lowell. The other piece to this is that it also gives us a lot more programming options. So now we have, where we didn't previously have, a zero depth pool that we can do some lap swimming in, we can do some swim lessons in. Our programming opportunities improve significantly with the size of this footprint.
Go ahead. Oh, I don't know if Greg's
You wanna
back
come
there
over
today
here,
or
Scott?
not. Yeah, actually, never mind. We'll use the staff mic.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Doug actually pretty much took the words out of my mouth as far as the functionality of
watch
these
timing.
pools. Obviously, it offers a lot more. So the specifics, that 6-lane pool is a 25-yard, 75-foot length in pool, which is a standard length for, you know, again, you can do more competition based as opposed to the current pool. And again, as Doug had mentioned, it does provide a lot more options relative to the various programs that you can do. And I guess the only other thing I would add is, again, one of the, and maybe this is obvious, but with that existing pool, when you have that immediate 3-foot depth, it is difficult. I mean, you do have to take some steps down. You have to use a ladder to get down. Whereas
I'm actually going to ask, cut you off there just for timing. I think we got to the number of people that can be served. And these are so conceptual that we're going to stick with concepts. Thank you, though. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, I do have a question before Doug moves on. So the first time I think this came in front of us, I'm going to misremember the numbers, but I wanted to say it was $9 to $12 million per pool to renovate, and we didn't quite know where it was going to fit in there, but we anticipated it being a little bit cheaper to renovate than to rebuild. What changed when we did these studies that made the rebuild so much, or the renovation so much more expensive?
I'm going to let Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I'm also going to let Scott Roberts answer that question.
And then I'm going to just ask that I think that there's another option related to this one. So I wonder if we don't do that at the end. Okay, great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we'll move to the third option, which would be to, if Madam Mayor, if council members were considering this option, one of the things that we get out of moving it to 5 blocks away is we get a larger footprint. So now we can expand the decking, we can add shade structures to 2 different locations on the decking. We can expand the size of the 25-yard pool to an 8-lane pool now. We don't have any 8-lane pools in our inventory. All the other buildings pretty much remain the same. This is just a little bit larger footprint. And if from the previous slide, sorry, it's 7.4 million. This one is at 7.8 million with that plus or minus 10%. So it is a little bit larger cost. We could work numbers down and getting into closer to that 7.4 million. We took the liberty of just putting the shade structures and expanding. If we're going to a larger footprint, we created a little bit larger pool. So,
Well, and I'd say that that's key here. If we're going to a larger footprint, to be able to do a little bit more of an investment in the bench is tied to it. So it makes sense that you would have added a little bit more there.
thank you, Mayor.
And if those are the 3 choices now I'm going to have him answer that question.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if you could, and then also if you could just let us know that what would happen with option 1, what would happen to the pool at South if we did go with option 3?
Okay, so that's probably a Doug question.
Yeah.
Or frankly, it's a question for this council as we weigh what the next steps are. But let's hear from Doug too.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this point, we will provide at the end of this presentation some recommendations to you. There isn't a recommendation in there on what we're asking you to do with South Pool. We're just saying at this point, this is what we recommend. I think the mayor hit it on the head. It's something I would come back to you. What do you want us to do moving forward with that location if you were to choose the recommendations that we bring forward? Scott.
Okay, so in regards to the added cost, and I apologize, I wasn't, part of that original presentation, so I can't get too specific for you, but
I think though, if I could, I'm just getting mindful of time. The question is, why is it more expensive to restore than it is to build a new one? Like just that. So look at
Yep.
what you looked at based on the analysis that you took, that question.
So the delta is, imagine if you will, I mean, we have the structure, but again, you have to be very careful with this existing structure in terms of maintaining its structural integrity. So there's going to be a lot of additional costs relative to just shoring it up, keeping it structurally integral, as well as because of its unique structure. One of the things we talked about with the CM is they're literally going to have to crane all the equipment in. Everything's going to have to be either hand dug or, again, very, very slow and meticulous process. So that all just starts to add to the cost. Additionally, you've got a vertical element now. Instead of it being an in-ground pool, you've got the walls, both exterior and interior, that you are increased finishes. So that's where things just started to add up. And then frankly, there's a level of risk. It's an existing structure that has, been here for 70 years. It does have it is structurally sound, but it does need rehabilitation. And we're going to have to come back and add coatings to it to protect it so that it will have a longer life. So that's what started to compound the cost.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you. Yes.
quick question. Do we know what is the lifetime that was on these bins pools to begin with?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, as far as like when they originally were built, how long do they think they would last? I don't think that I've ever read where they anticipated it was going to last for 70 years. There's about a dozen of these, I think, or so still out there somewhere in the country.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Quick question. It's hard for me to tell the scale. Are options 2 and 3 the same size pool and amenities and everything?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Stead, no, this is a much smaller footprint. The lap pool is 6 lanes versus 8 lanes in the other. And this one has very little decking, a couple of small areas where you'd be able to sit to observe. Whereas the Whitney location, because we have a larger footprint, we've actually expanded the decking on this and created some shade areas and just a little bit larger footprint.
Thank you.
So low pool, as I mentioned again earlier, we only are bringing forward one alternative and one recommendation for low, and that is to renovate the current facility. Again, I put our 10-minute walk in. That's what you see. It is located in a historic district overlay, which does create some considerations in how we move forward here as well. And then this is just basically duplicative of what you saw with the south pool. Same type of design, same locker rooms in the back. All the buildings are in the back. They did flip the two, so storage would now be at the bottom and the entryway would be now at the top hallway. So you come through the lobby, walk around the top hallway, and then the elevator would be located on that side. So it just flipped, it mirrored what we were doing at South and just flipped it.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
you can go to the next slide there, if you could. Based on these recommendations, let's say we went with a 7 million-ish option on the first one, so option 2 or 3, and then Lowell Pool as recommended. And let's assume that if we pass the budget, that we have another $2 million appropriated for this. How much are we short? Seems like that's about 16 million. How much are we short if we did a 9 and $7 million options?
Madam Mayor, Council President, I think your numbers are pretty close. We would still be, if you took option, if you take this recommendation, you're looking at straight out 9.4 plus or minus 15%, and then 7.8 plus or minus 10%. And so your numbers are pretty close. So I believe we have 2 million this next year in the budget to get started on the design, if that's the desire of the mayor and council. And so you'd still be looking at probably somewhere in that 15 to 16,000, million range to fund both.
And how much, remind me how much we have now?
That's the question, because we've been holding funds for
Yeah.
these pools.
The last number I saw was about 3.3 at one location and 3.4 at another
6
location.
and 8, so half, so 8
Okay.
million.
My apologies. So Madam Mayor, council members, in working with the team that I identified earlier in an earlier slide, these are the recommendations that we have come up with. And that would be renovate Lowell and bring everything, all the deficiencies up to code. And then recommend that South Pool be relocated at Whitney Elementary School. And then council, we can have conversations about what your wishes are for the current South location on how we'd move forward with that.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Doug, I know that part of this depends on how much money the council approves in budgets. Do you have a timeline for either or both? What we're looking at here?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we built, as I mentioned in one of the slides, the inflationary cost in that 25, 26 range. So in a perfect world, if council said march ahead, we're going to do these right now, then we would do the design within the next year, be ready to start construction in the summer of 25, and they would be completed in the summer of 26.
And then actually, no, that answers the question there.
Right. Councilmember Corliss.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Doug, thank you very much for the presentation and running us through options, because I think that's what we were looking for and requesting. A couple follow-up questions. Are we looking to build these, start these builds together, or are we looking to place one before the other? And sorry if I missed that talking to Councilmember Nash.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, we're open to however council wants to move forward with that. Budgeting is going to be the major consideration on that. We just built in the inflationary cost to say this is what the options are. If both of these happened in 25, 26, our contractor feels comfortable, this is what it would cost to do that. So that's all we've come forward with. Now we would need to figure out the money piece to it.
Well, and I want to jump into, I was a little slow on the update. We actually have $14 million program for the two pools.
Oh.
So
And that assumes the 2 million that's in the budget right now?
yes, with council approval,
Okay.
there is in 2026, when we looked at what we had, what we could allocate to it, the budget tonight includes technically $12 million within the CIP. But that includes 2 additional. So the total comes, because we've been holding some, to $14 million
So-
of the 15-ish, 16 that we need
So we might be about 3 million short.
max.
Okay.
If we work quickly. And I'll jump in on this too. I mean, this is the opportunity, as we've seen time and time again, folks that are willing to step up and help invest. I believe that there are options to look for end of year funds, as well as being creative to get to the point where we can actually say go a year from now, and we're confident in the money being there.
Madam Mayor, Doug, has there been any, like, there seems like there's a lot of folks interested in the restoration of these pools. Has there been any folks that are philanthropically minded about helping out the city with this? Has that been conversations that we pursued? Is there obvious folks that have been advocating for this that might step up to the plate here?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, those conversations have occurred. There are some fundraising opportunities that the Friends of Pools, I believe is the name of the organization, have made some attempts in that area. As you're aware, philanthropic donations come from those that are interested in a particular project. We haven't come across anybody yet that is really interested in the pools. There's a tremendous interest in the pools being preserved and a tremendous interest in having community pools as well.
And I want to say too, just as we're wrapping up and we're thinking about the cost for these, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out and thank the school district in one of the alternatives being provided, because the proposal from the school district to partner with us at Whitney allows us to do quite a bit more than we would have been able to do otherwise. And that in itself is quite valuable, I think, when we think about kind of the history of both public-public and public-private partnerships. And we've seen time and again that Doug's team is not leaving any stones unturned when it comes to potential partner funders and philanthropists. But we know what that delta is that we need to close in the next year as plans are being developed.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, I said Kathy.
Sorry,
you were
Lucy.
probably-
If I may, this is one of the topics, restoring these and preserving the pools has been a number one topic that I've received emails about since I've been in office. And I know there was a lot of work before I've been in office and discussion on this. And it seems like our last outreach, we did have a lot of positive comments of wanting to restore this. Doug, can you kind of walk me through maybe at a high level or the better benefits of restoring one over another? And I mean, I guess I'd look at it, if we were going to restore one, why Lowell over South?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, first and foremost, we really don't have an option at Lowell. So that one is, the decision on that is kind of made for us. We don't have an alternate location. We could build a new pool and bring that to you. And we certainly are making recommendations to the council that these pools be tore down, and there's no option or alternative there. What I would say is that we haven't had a new pool since 1998. That's the last time that Ivy Wild Pool was built. So this gives us an opportunity, hopefully, to look at what we can do with the south location, but 5 blocks away, have a facility that is fully accessible. It would have a zero depth analysis done to it so that any and all of our constituents would be able to use it. It would be more of a regional pool. So it would be a destination pool similar to Ivy Wild and the natatorium. But in addition to that, would serve those 4,300 residents that live in that area as well. So we really would be creating an opportunity, I think, that might be a best case scenario for the entire city.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, follow up. Is there, can you walk us through, is there benefits putting, if we were to do a new school, having it at Whitney Elementary versus keeping it at South Junior High? Is there a community center? Is that Whitney? Is that right? Or
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, yeah, we have a teen community center at that location. I guess the biggest benefit would be we don't have, if we're going to look at doing a new pool, it would make sense to recommend to council a location very close by that nearly doubles the 10-minute walk exposure we'll have at that location, and also create at the same time not only something for that neighborhood, but would be creating an asset that would serve the entire community, because it would become a destination pool, as I mentioned, similar to our natatorium and Ivy Wild pools.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Doug, you are the most popular guy at City Hall. I just have to tell you that. And I'm grateful we get to have this conversation, because there's a lot of cities that don't get to have the conversation about pools. And to me, it's a really fundamentally important thing that we offer to our kids and our families. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. So I'm looking at the historic background online for the pools. Thank you to the city website, folks. This is fantastic. It looks like the last time we had a survey on this was February of 2022, and it closed in March of 2022. So 2 years ago. And this is the first time since then we're seeing an actual proposal on the table. Like, you have a choice. Am I understanding that correctly?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, that we've gotten to this point,
Yeah.
like actually having somewhat of a design. Our surveying work before was, would you like to see a new pool, or would you like to see the existing pool deficiencies brought up to code?
So bigger picture, and now we actually have we've got numbers, we've got potential, a skeleton of a design. What would it look like to now take this out to the public for them to give us feedback, since it's been 2 years since we surveyed them?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, we hadn't really considered that at this point. I think we were looking at getting in a firm direction, and then I think we would have an internal discussion of what our next steps might be and what that would look like. But we certainly are open to doing that if that's a direction Mayor and Council would like to see.
Have you briefed anyone ahead of time? I mean, we're obviously getting the big reveal. Have you briefed any of the folks that are involved in the advocacy on the pools prior to this about what the potential solutions might be?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, we have not, other
Okay.
than just alerting those that we have contacts with that this particular
It's coming up.
evening was coming to us.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Mayor. Thank you so much, Doug. I think the numbers in terms of visitability are staggering, but not surprising. Having young kids, you need a diverse set of options just for me alone. And then we have aging populations. We have just the amount of programming that a new pool could do in South Boise. So thank you so much for helping illustrate that. I just want to also point out, I love that you're talking about this being a regional destination pool. Ivy Wild is our neighborhood pool, maybe, but we still go to the natatorium because the slide's bigger. My kids love it, right? I'm sure that we'll visit this one too. And so thinking about it as an opportunity for the entire city to use is huge. Being on a transit line is huge. Being adjacent to a school with a lot of kids is huge. So I really think that this kind of hits it out of the park, and appreciate you illustrating how the other site has limitations that wouldn't allow for this. So thank you.
Madam Mayor. Perfect.
Thank you. Hi, Doug. Thanks for bringing us these options. Can you tell me, if we were to relocate the pool site, what would happen to the old historic pool? And then my second question is, if we were to do a new build, would the public have an opportunity for input on that design?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Stead, excuse me, on your first question, I don't have an answer for that, other than we're not sitting here today and never have said that that pool would be torn down, for example. So that's still open.
Right. I want to reiterate that that would come back for council discussion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And on your second question, I think once we get our firm direction, then we can come back with next steps. Do we take this back out to the public? Do we have conversations with the public about what the new pool would look like? Which is pretty limited because a pool is a pool, and some of the toys we would put in the pool are pretty limited as well. And then what we would do with South would be the other wild card there.
Madam Mayor, well, Doug, first, I would like to just affirm direction for Lowell Pool. I don't think you've given us a lot of options for that one. That's what I think we need to do for Lowell Pool. Had it been a chance to renovate it and tear it down and build something else, I think that there would have been a lot of support to keep that as well. So thank you for making that option for us really, really easy for Lowell. We've had this conversation for a long time now. I'm very hesitant to keep kicking the can down the road. I'm very, very familiar with the conversation. I've been involved for a while. I realize that some of our other council members haven't. So I don't know if they need more time for this. I do think that we need to have a discussion about what would happen with South Pool if we move to the other location. And I think that needs to be a really robust discussion before any changes would be made. I also think that if we look at the numbers and if we look at the size of the pool and we look at the cost and we look at the kids that would be served, we would be making a mistake not to consider moving to Whitney Elementary School. That's a school that's one of our lowest income schools. We have a community center there that's right now. There's nothing that serves teens in that area. Every single one of those kids who live in that area, if they need to access South Pool, are having to cross over Overland to get there right now. To me, it makes sense financially. It makes sense impact-wise, but it doesn't make sense to do that if we lose an opportunity for preserving some of the historic integrity at South Pool. We've done that at a number of different places. We've done that at the train depot. It's not a spot for people to get off and on trains anymore, but it's a great event center. We've done that for some of our markets in different neighborhoods. It's not exactly what it was before, but they're great restaurants. They're doing a variety of different things. We've done that with facade easements all over the city to make sure that we're still recognizing, preserving that history. And whether it's skate parks or cooling zones or hammock parks or a variety of things, there's a lot of stuff that I think that we need to evaluate before we do anything with that area. But as someone who's been very involved in this discussion, I know it's not going to be really popular. I think it's important that we preserve the history at Lowell. We're going to do that. I think it's important that we preserve the history at South by coming up with something creative for that spot. And I think it's important that we recognize the impact that this is going to have on our community members and the number of kids that will have the ability to get there safely, and the cost that's going to save and make it possible for us to move forward faster. So as someone who's been involved in this discussion for a really long time, I know it's complicated and I know that it may not be popular. I think it makes sense to move the location to South and figure out what we can do, move to Whitney and figure out what we can do to preserve historic integrity with the current spot there at South.
Mayor.
I'm gonna go here and then here.
Doug, would there be an opportunity to potentially affirm staff recommendations today and then solicit public input for South Pool? Would that be an option?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, yes.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
so I'm going to ask a follow-up on that. Is it possible to affirm direction for Lowell Pool and then ask for public input for South Pool and a little bit more time so that people can actually have a voice on what's on the table? So we can get one going and look at the other one?
I would say anything's possible depending on what council wishes. So would like
Super.
council to make that decision on that direction today.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, and Doug, thank you very much for the options. I think because now we do have some options to present, I think it would be a good opportunity to have the public weigh in on what that they would like to see itself. I think we have a national night out coming up. That would be a good opportunity to put out some QR codes and maybe solicit some feedback just as a suggestion that way. But I think it is imperative that we get feedback from the public on which direction they want us to look at for South.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
I'd move that we affirm direction of the recommendations as presented by staff for Lowell Pool and defer action on South Pool until and direct staff to solicit public feedback on South Pool.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. There's been a lot of discussion, so I'm just gonna ask for a vote. Or you know what, if somebody needs to say something, you can. We've got 5 minutes and we're gonna do exec over dinner.
Madam Mayor, I'm not opposed to going to public feedback. I would rather, at this point, get public feedback on what to do with South Pool not being remodeled, what we can do at that location, and focus public feedback on what can we do creatively here and what would you like to see at the new Whitney location. Here's why. If we do public outreach on what should we do now, we're going to have to do public outreach again on what should we do at this new location and public outreach again on what should we do with the old structure if we don't go that way. And I think we got to be careful how many times we kick this can down the road, because my biggest priority is getting kids in pools as soon as possible and protecting historic value at the same time.
Madam Mayor, I agree with that. I support staff's current recommendation and would love public input on how we could repurpose the historic site of the South Pool. But I think when you outline that the attendance, the visits, the folks in the community that it will reach, doubling the size and the availability, I think it's a no-brainer to give that gift to the community without the degradation of the historic site.
Madam Mayor, ditto.
Madam Mayor, although this is my motion, I share Councilmember Halliburton's concerns about this. Time is our enemy on this. The costs are only going to increase. I will tell you, if we renovate both pools, we're going to spend $20 million on 2 pools that me and Councilmember Morales are going to drive past every single time so we can go to Ivy Wild and the natatorium. So I'm ready to move forward with Whitney. I want council to be confident in that decision though, which is why I brought forward the motion. And I'm hopeful that we can take action on this very soon because again, time is our enemy and we need to get these pools under construction or else we're just going to keep outrunning our budget on this.
Well, you're able to vote against the motion that's on the floor.
My own motion?
It's your own motion. You made a motion for discussion purposes.
What I'm trying to say is I want council to have my level of confidence in this decision. It doesn't feel like it's right there with the amount of time we've had for this tonight. So
Your vote's your decision, but you made a motion for discussion purposes and you can vote however you'd like.
And Madam Mayor, I guess I would just remind that your motion was to defer, but to also instruct staff to go to public comment on what to do with this pool.
No, for staff to solicit public feedback. I wasn't
right.
asking for a public hearing on it. I want to make sure that's clear.
Right. You asked that we move ahead with the Lowell Pool and a public process be started to ask the question, do you want South Pool or Whitney Pool? Is my understanding of your motion.
Yes, that's my motion.
All right. Clerk?
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton,
No.
Morales,
No.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
No.
Willetts.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, we have 3 yeses and 3 nos. Will you please cast a vote to break the tie?
No.
Madam Mayor, I move that we affirm staff's recommendations to renovate and bring the current pool up to code at Lowell Pool and relocate and construct a new pool at Whitney Elementary School.
Second.
Madam Mayor, if I could just speak to the motion, same comments I just made, but I really like what Parks has brought to us. I did not want to spend $20 million on pools just to drive past them to go to Ivy Wild or the Natatorium. I think this is exactly what this part of the community would like to see. As a parent of young children, Fairmont, I live 2 blocks away from Fairmont Pool, and it's a great opportunity to bring the community together for weekly swim meets that are sponsored there. And I want that same opportunity for the folks that will enjoy the new pool at Whitney.
Madam Mayor.
Halliburton, Corliss.
I'm wondering if the motion maker would add to go to public feedback for what to do with South now that it's not going to be the pool,
The historic structure.
the historic structure, and to also go to public comment for what could be incorporated at the Whitney site.
Sure.
Second.
Okay, that's covered by both.
Great,
Corliss?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Sorry, Jimmy. Thank you. Doug, thanks for the options you brought here today. I think the public feedback is very important, and it seems, but I'm also worried, as Jimmy had mentioned, that we would kick the can down the road by trying to have more meetings on this and other. I think the most important thing, as I look about it, is the service the pool is going to provide to the community. With the new pool, we are going to service more community members. We're going to have more people lap swimming. We're going to have an opportunity to teach new kids how to swim, and we're going to have an opportunity for little kids to have a place to play, and more importantly, to have a place for everyone to sit as well. So what I appreciate, I would rather have had time for the public to comment. I do appreciate the fact that we are looking at a service and we don't want to wait 3 more years, 2 more years. We want to get these pools up and running as quick as we can to get the service out to the community. So that's why I'll be voting yes on this motion.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for the change in the motion. I think that's really important. I'll be supporting the motion, and here's why. I think we need pools, but it will break my heart if something happens to that structure. And I have a love of history, and I do not want to see that torn down. I want to see it preserved. So I don't want that to be part of the motion. So I want to echo to you all. I wish we would have had more time for your feedback, for you to actually react to something. But you see what's happening up here, and we obviously want to get things moving, but you have a commitment from me. I don't want to see that pool torn down.
Madam Mayor, if I could just one more time, I want to thank staff for figuring this out. We've been asking you to do this for a while. It's been a complicated process. We ended up with a really easy decision on Lowell. I think it would have been the decision we would have been moving towards regardless, but you put a ton of work into this, and I want to thank you for all that. I know for you all, it may not feel like it, but your pressure pushing this forward did get this done faster. And it seems like a really long process. It was a really long process. It would have taken longer without your advocacy and without that public pressure. I realize that there's going to be some people that are frustrated, especially frustrated at me, that there won't be another generation of kids swimming at South Pool. I have 3 generations of family members, including myself, that swam at the Lowell Pool, and I know how important that historic legacy is, but I don't think that that historic legacy has to be separate. I think we can serve a lot of kids who are in desperate need of something in their neighborhood and a safe way to get them, and also get really creative in figuring out how can we do something special with this site. And I truly believe that we can do something special with the South site, still celebrate that history, and also serve a huge portion of the community at the same time. So I do want to thank you for your engagement. You did push this forward faster. I do agree with that the need for additional public comment is always really nice. I also think that you've been engaging in public comment now for about 5 years, and I'm not sure what we would have gotten if we would have extended it a little bit longer, but now we've got something new for you to comment on. Let's figure out what Whitney is going to look like. Let's figure out something awesome to do with the South Pool location. Thanks for all your hard work.
And I'm going to weigh in since I had to vote on that first motion, and now it looks like everybody's going to be voting differently and not have me vote on this motion. I think this is really exciting. I'm committed to, as Jimmy said, making sure that we have a public process to look at how we preserve the history of that special South Pool. And when we look at what it costs, if we could do something different and bigger at Lowell, I appreciate the Parks Department really looking hard at what we could do in each spot. I got to tell you, the council that heard all that public feedback when we started this wanted to do 2 new pools based on what they were hearing from families that needed places for their kids to go safely. And what we've been able to do with this is respond to folks that care deeply about the history of these pools and the design and architecture, come up with a way to save many ways, because yes, we're spending a little bit more money, but there's site constraints. But then look at how much more we can invest in our bench with a pool right next to Whitney School, with our community center, where there are thousands of kids that can walk safely and not have to cross those busy streets and go from community center programming in the summer right over to the pool. This is an investment in the bench that we haven't made in far too long, frankly. And I'm really excited about it, that we're looking at this while also being able to preserve what's so special about that design of South Pool and look creatively at what that becomes in the future, that second use of a really interesting, unique, special thing that we have here right here in Boise, where we have so few. And look forward to that discussion about how we honor that history and provide so much more for our kids up on the bench while saving money for taxpayers and getting it done on the schedule that we committed to a couple years ago. Clerk?
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Willetts.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
No, oh, wait, actually, I need a motion quickly for exec. We're going to take dinner and exec at the same time. We'll be back here as close to 6 as possible.
Madam Mayor, pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74206, 1C and F, I move to enter an executive session to consider the acquisition of real property not owned by a public agency and to commute with legal counsel to discuss pending litigation or imminent litigation.
Second.
Clerk?
Corliss.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Willetts.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.